In this community, I do not, is that okay? So, okay. In this community, I don't really need to say like, open source is big, open source is huge, we know that, right? And what this means, because open source is so big, it is having a lot of influence on our community. And not only just end users, like people who use Firefox or Chrome or any of the other things, but even people who are trying to write code, who are trying to become part of the open source community. GitHub alone has 14 million users, which makes us think, which makes it necessary that we think, how inclusive are we in a community that is open source in general? And what does that mean for people who are trying to become part of the community, who want to become part of the community because they want to help, they want to program, and it also really helps with people's careers, right? People have said like they look at the GitHub resume or GitHub profile more than a basic career resume. So it's important that we make the community as open as possible. And not just for helping, can you hear me or should I stand next to the mic? So open source, not just it helps the newcomers, but open source really relies also on the newcomers. We need diversity of ideas, we need new people, we need sustainability of the community. But how open is open source? Steinmacher et al., they are the researchers we collaborate with at Northern Arizona University. They looked at different open source communities, and they found that it's not really easy for people to become contributors. Because problems could be absence of any kind of response when I try to make a contribution, how polite people are, how useful the feedback is. In this one particular project, it was Apache Hadoop, over a 3-year period when they looked at the number of people who had wanted to be part of contribution by looking at mailing lists or any kind of suggestions, and how many actually made a contribution that was accepted, there was 82% of dropouts. Right? Let's think that like 82% of people who wanted to be part of the community could not. And when we think about, okay, if that many newcomers are not able to look at it, what percentage of women are actually being left behind? We know as such, women are underrepresented in computer science. A report by NCWIT, which is National Council of Women in Technology, found that of the 57% of occupational workforce, that's professional, is made of women. But of that, if we take the computational or computing workforce, it's only 27%. Right? So 27% of women in computing jobs. How about in open source? Research by David and Shapiro and Robles has said maybe less than 10% of open source contributors are women. Ghosh said it's like 1.5%. So, it's different communities that people have looked at, so that's why the numbers are a little different. If you look at the top 5,000 open source projects in GitHub, less than 5% have women owners. And is it because women are competent? No, right? So there's another researcher like Sarah Lata from North Carolina State University, and they looked at different differences between men and women when their pull request acceptance rates. There was no statistical difference in anything except when people were newcomers or basically outsiders, and when their profiles, you could make out the gender. Women had 12% less chances of getting the pull request accepted. But if the gender was neutral, you could not make out the gender, there was no difference. Right? There's something going on. And as Emma said, is like, we know this, a lot of research is looking into it, and so our foundations, Mozilla has a big group, Linux is interested, Drupal is interested, so we are all interested. And a lot of researchers are looking into how to increase diversity and inclusion. What we are looking at is, what about the tools? The tools are the interface. The infrastructure is what every newcomer has to deal with. Are there some barriers right at that juncture that we can help fix? So what we're looking at is 3 questions, looking at 3 populations. First is, how do these tools and technologies cause barriers that cause people to be left behind? How challenging they are, particularly for newcomers, because they're coming into the community, maybe they're first-time contributors to a project or first-time contributors to open source in general, and delving deeper into what happens when the newcomers are women. So what we did, we are researchers, so we do proper study, we do like a field study. So what we did is we went and talked with 5 teams across 2 companies, and these teams were software professionals, all open source developers, and we used a process called gender map, which is a methodology that is rooted in human-computer interaction analysis mechanisms. And what people do is they're software professionals, they evaluate their own software, they walk through the different interfaces that their tool has, and they do that by looking at a particular persona. Do we know what personas are? Personas is like, you use not a fake but a made-up profile of a typical user, and you give them certain characteristics, pictures, so that you can be empathetic about what that particular user would want, how to channel that person. What GenderMag does, it uses Abby as a persona, and she's a woman newcomer. And I'll talk a little bit more about her later. And you use this persona and you walk through different use cases, like, okay, Abby wants to submit a pull request using this particular interface, use GitHub. And then you walk through and see where problems could occur. And looking at the 3 populations we're talking about, if we just look at the problems and issues that tools and technology could have, software professionals in their own projects found issues. These are 5 projects. The tools that they use, which was first of all the GitHub command line. A lot of people found there will be problems using the GitHub command line, because the first time you clone or download from GitHub, going to the actual Git command line, not GitHub command line, Git command line, the GitHub website, the infrastructures that they use, including documentation and wiki, because information was split across different places. There was outdated documentation, like what was happening. Here is an example of a problem with pull request. So here is a software professional while they're looking at their use case, and they're channeling Abby here. And Abby has done the work. She's competent. She has the expertise. So she says, like, I know my stuff works, but I really don't know what a pull request should look like, because the first time she's contributing. Another participant says, like, if Abby is trying to provide a pull request, the hard part is, just the interface issue, like, where in the button should I do? Create a pull request, make a new pull request, like, where should I go? Some of them said that, the terminology is very geeky, is very masculine, like push upstream, or some of this like cute language is being used. So what we found is, as they were going through different use cases, they considered different steps, and over here are the 5 use cases they looked at. So, Abby would want to have help with pull requests on GitHub. She would use GitHub issue tracker to find a problem to work with, get familiar with the project and find a task, set up the environment, and then submit a pull request. And different teams, started the first scenario and they went as far as they could. And if we found out the number of steps per use case, so the first one, there are 24 steps, well, just splitting the entire use case into every interaction stage. And out of the 24, 13 places they found there would be some kind of a problem or some kind of hiccup that the interface would cause. And if you look at just the percentages here, it ranges from 7% to 71%. And the highest one is like, finding a right task or finding an issue that would be useful that I could actually start working with as a newcomer, right? And if that is such a big problem, how are our newcomers going to be able to find a task and do something about it? So bottom line is, it's not just feature bugs or UI issues. There are those too, like where is the button I need to press, but also it has a whole lot of socio-technical spectrum, like what task would be right for me? Who should I actually get help from? So the tools, because it's open source, a lot of the interaction, everything is dependent on the tools, and they are causing the hurdles that causes people to have problems or drop out. And if we kind of put a lens about which of these problems are particularly challenging for newcomers, past research has found there are actually 58 types of barriers or 58 types of challenges across 6 categories. And some of them are like newcomer orientation. Some of them is documentation. Some of them is technical hurdle of actually using the tools. What we looked at is when we had those 5 use cases that I read out that we were saying, as a newcomer, Abby would like to do, we found 24 of these types to be relevant across all the 6 categories. An example would be newcomer orientation. And, this is a whole big list that we have. I don't talk about that. But what we did was like, here are all the newcomer orientations, and of these 4 were relevant, and this dark black or deep blue is what an issue could occur based on what we looked at the use case to be, and then where our participants actually found problems. Here is a particular opening a pull request, and there is a create pull request, and let's say Abby has already come here, and she's trying to find out how to do the pull request, and over here is where in this particular project the contributing guideline was there. So participants felt when they were looking at their own project, this is how they have set up their workflow, found that if newcomers did not know about GitHub, if newcomers did not know the workflow, they would be having lots of trouble doing the contribution. So participant 59 in this case, it says, okay, so in this case our newcomer Abby is going to be very confused about how to contribute. And so how to contribute is not readily visible and clearly seen. So these are our newcomer tool barriers, and I have not listed all the 6 categories, but here are 4. And these are total raw numbers that our participants found in this project. And some of the most identified barriers was, the technical hurdle was actually getting the workspace to be built locally. So I want to contribute, I have to download, I have to clone, but how do I build it up before I can start actually doing anything? Unclear documentation, we all know how hard it is to have documentation that is not fragmented, that is not obsolete. Culture differences were not as big because we were looking at, just 5 use cases in a single sitting. But even if someone is not very sure, if someone wants to actually talk to a real person, talk to someone to understand if this is the right project to work or this is the right task to work, it's very hard to do. Orientation is 56, and if you look at it, the most frequent problem they found was the contribution workflow is not clear. So how would someone start contributing? So newcomer barriers are due to, at least in part, the tools and interfaces that people have to work with. But now comes the most interesting part, right? The whole talk is about gender biases. So why should you think, or why might gender biases be embedded in tools? Any idea? What might be happening? Why do tools have to be gender biased?
Because if you make something unique for yourself, and they're being made by men. Like even the time over here where you come in, if you're not tall enough, like you go in, you have to get taller to get the picture taken.
I know, I think I have only my head on the top, right? Right over there. And
so
also,
obviously someone tall probably height for that. And those things are invisible.
how many of you have problems with the labels? Mine kept peeling off because of a certain location you're supposed to put them in, right? So, so question is, does software support a variety of smart users? Yes? No?
So the question is, lots of people are smart, but a lot of the metrics for software that I use are sort of, if I create a metric or something I'm going to create something that works in my head. And if I'm an old white dude, and I might be shit, then I'm going to create something that works for me, and there's going to be certain cognitive bias.
Right. So basically unconscious bias. Because as human beings, we see the world a certain way, and we just expect that, hey, everyone is like us. I see the world this way, so everyone should be. But if you are one kind of a smart user, right over here, then it's just not that you're trying to make it work. You're just saying, hey, this is how I work. This is what my users do. This is what everyone does. But what happens is, if more than 50% of not more than maybe 90% of the software is being developed by one kind of smart users, maybe white dudes or just males, then what happens is a whole bunch of other users are left behind. So what can we do about them? Are we lost? I'm here, right? I have to save you all. So how can we identify, not me, our work, right? So how can we actually identify these gender biases? It's like unconsciously, right? We just said it's not someone who does it consciously. They're not trying to just keep everyone out, but it just bleeds into the system. So what we can use is a tool or process called gender MAC. What is gender MAC? Gender MAC is gender inclusive magnifier, and the process that you use is you're evaluating your tool's inclusivityness. So you'll look at it, you'll go through the process, I'll talk about it, and what you'll find is inclusivity bugs, and then you can take steps to fix it. So what gender MAC does, it uses gendered personas, so there are 4 of them, and they represent a range of users. So what we have over here is Tim. He's our champion or archetypical male person, male developer. Here is Abby, who is the archetypical woman developer. And then there are the Pats. They are twins. They're equal in every way, but one happens to be male and one happens to be woman. And what differentiates this, right? There could be very many differentiations that happen with men and women, but last 10 to 15 years of study, not only in computer science, but in other fields, have said that there are actually fundamental ways in which men and women problem solve differently. And these are 5 facets. These are cognitive styles, or problem-solving styles, where men are statistically different than women. And these are like motivations. Why is someone behind the tool? Like Emma spent 2 hours yesterday trying to figure this out because she wanted to learn this super cool, amazing conference technology. No, she had to get it done for me, right? Because why is someone in front of the tool that you have built is because they have to get the job done versus, hey, I don't know what the latest social media new app is, I want to learn about that, right? Information processing style. Women are known to actually look at the full amount of information and then take any steps, whereas men take small amounts of information then work on it. Small amounts of information and they work on it. Computer self-efficacy. Now, how confident someone is on their computer skills, and again, this is the same role, right? It's not that I have definitely more self-confidence on my computer usage than, say, a janitor. But among the male here, among the open source developers here, I might have less confidence than them, right? So it's the same role who has more confidence, and it is confidence, nothing about competence, right? So there might be men with way less confidence but way higher confidence. On risk averseness, whether I want to take any risk, the delivery is coming, the talk is ready, should I try this new app? No, should I try putting up a new update on my computer? I don't want to mess things up. And tech learning style is people, women tend to like process-oriented learning, so step-by-step instruction kind of following, whereas men like to tinker. It's like, oh, a point here, oh, let me click what this button does. Oh, contributing MD, let me click on it, and then let me click on it, right? And what happens is sometimes when you tinker, you might get lost somewhere because you're having a certain goal, and then you kind of went away somewhere else. And again, none of these, one style is not better than the other. They are just different styles, and eventually you get the same results. But if tools and technology is focusing on one style, then it's kind of making disadvantaging the other. So here what we have is the persona I talked earlier. So we have Abby. One thing to think about here is like this is our main persona's face, but we also have 3 other pictures. Of them, 2 are from different age and different racial origin, but we also have one man, right? Because what this means is not that all men behave the same way or all women behave the same way. The 5 factors we talk about, many times it's situational, many times, I am very much, I only learn stuff when I have to learn, motivations. I have sort of lower computer self-efficacy. I am risk averse, but I did not read instructions. I just start doing stuff. So my information processing style and learning style is kind of more tinkering based and not very much process based. So as a human, you will not have all 5 facets in one way, right? So every human works differently, but what we have done is, in Abby, we have put all the facets that are statistically associated more with women. Let's take one facet here, and it's attitude towards risk. What this says is Abby rarely has spare time, so she's risk averse about using unfamiliar technology. It's not that she cannot use unfamiliar technology, right? She doesn't want to spend her time on that, so that might need her to spend extra time. So what happened was, sorry, my animation is a little off here. Okay, I don't know why those two popped up before. So this is based on, if you look at the risk averseness problem-solving facets, this is a survey done in a large software company and self-reporting by the respondents. And blue bars are men, pink bars are women. And this is set up around who thinks themselves to be most risk tolerant and most averse. So first thing we want to show is the overlap, right? There's a lot of overlap between the blue bars and the pink bars. So that means that there are women and men who are tolerant versus not tolerant. The other thing to look at is the lines. Even though there is an overlap, women are more likely to be risk averse than men. It goes up. And men are more tolerant than women. So our personas, Tim is the guy. He's kind of representing all the most risk-tolerant people, and Abby over here is the risk-averse people. And here's the line. I'm going to go back and put the line again, because what that means is if our software developers are all like Tim, they're building software like Tim, for Tim, then all these other people are left behind. And you have like more than 50%, 60-ish% of men who are actually left behind, and a lot more women who are left behind, right? So how gender mag works, as I said, it's a cognitive walkthrough method. You first pick a persona. Typically, you pick Abby, because more likely Abby is going to find more problems. You pick a use case in your tool. Example, I want to find a bookstore, and in an augmented bookstore, I want to find the science fiction library books. And this is actually a UI built by the XCI class, and this is their mock-up, and they have done the cognitive walkthrough on them. And then you walk through by saying like, okay, what are the ideas, what is the sub-goal that Abby would have in her map, in her mind, which is, I want to find a science fiction book. And then you break it down into the actual actions you will do on the UI. So these are like actual physical actions. Open the app, click on the camera, point the camera somewhere. So you have those actions. And for every action that you ask, would Abby know what to do at this step? If Abby does the step, would she know she's on the right path? Would she keep going to the next step? Right? So these are like a couple, 3-4 questions you ask. And in a group, you are these are designers sitting together on a workflow. And then if the answer is yes, that's great. If it is no or maybe, then you kind of say, why would Abby have some problems? And you try to match it to those 5 facets to say, like, is it because she has to tinker to get her way out, or which of the facets causes the problem? So taking it back to the open source world, we had our open source developers walking through their tools. We're using GenderMag, and this is what they were doing. And some of the examples or some of the wording that came out from the observations was, okay, Abby is trying to figure out how to make the first contribution, but blah, 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 it's going to take a while because of a comprehensive information processing style. She's trying to learn a lot, but the front page is giving way more information than what she needs at this point. Okay, and my box login has expired apparently. Another one, P61 says, the resources provided would be counterintuitive to the way Abby likes to learn. So again, it's like she likes to learn by a process-oriented way, but the information kind of spread across a lot of different places. So she will have to go and find all this information, and then she's going to get very confused, and it's going to take too long for her. So bringing back the categories we had. So what we did is, like, we started with all the problems we faced. We put it into categories of the newcomer barriers, and for each of these barriers, we found out what our participants had said about they might not be able to, Abby might not be able to answer it, and why. And if we find out the problems that were associated with some of these facets, anytime they said this is a problem because Abby would have learning issues, or because Abby would not be able to tinker her way out of it, this is what we found out as the percentages. So, 65, 64, 86. Overall, out of the 220 barriers, newcomer barriers that the participants raised, 160 of them had some facet involved, which means 73% of the problems are provided in a way that is counterproductive to how women, or in our case, Abby, actually do problem solving. So this is from the software professionals looking at their own use cases. We were interested in seeing if this is really true from actual newcomers. So we did another study. We had newcomers, 18 newcomers. So what this was is in a classroom setting. This is an open source class. And as part of the class, what they have to do, this was in Northern Arizona University, what they have to do is a semester-long class. They are taught about open source. And at the end of the course, 6 months, they have to make a contribution. And during this whole process, they were asked to keep diaries. And there were like 48 people who were in the class. I think there were only like 15 or 16 women. And of them, 9 had actually kept the diaries or had consented to the study. So we took those diaries, 9 women, and then we randomly selected the 9 men. And if you look at it, the number of barriers that women found is 251, whereas men found or men wrote about is only 83. The statistical difference between the barriers that men reported and the women reported, of course, is self-reporting, so men might not report everything, whereas women might report everything, so that's there. And of this, if you bring back to the facets of the biases, we see 61% of the biases of the barriers had gender biases, and only 39 for men. So women had more gender issues reported, but what is really interesting in this case is, in the past case, we only look from the Abby, the archetypical woman perspective. But if you look at over here, 39% of the problems that men have reported are also about this facet, which brings me this graph, right? There are all these other men here, this blue bar and this blue bar, that have these facets that are similar to Abby. So if we actually solve this, if we actually solve the problems for Abby might face, these 5 facets, we're making the tool or software inclusive for all. And this kind of goes back to curve cuts. We know the curve cuts, like when we cross the intersections, the curves have a cut. So originally it was used or created for accessibility for wheelchairs, but how many of us use it for our dragging our suitcases, right? Or strollers with babies, right? So because the curve cuts were done for people with wheelchairs, it helped that particular class of people, but it also helped other people that makes the software or the curves in this case more accessible for different use cases. So bottom line is, tools and infrastructure are actually implicated in the gender biases that we saw, because there might be other issues, but just the way they force someone to problem solve, just the way the cognitive styles are kind of more disadvantageous to how women think and how women problem solve. And because we're academics, we wanted to make sure we are not just making stuff up. We wanted to triangulate our results. So here is this particular result, which is professionals found barriers, and 73% of those barriers had facets involved. We looked at newcomers, and yes, we did find statistical difference between men and women and how they problem solve. We also found prior empirical work. So Steinmacher et al., Northern Arizona University, they found the barriers, and there's other research. And we have other, at least 3 different studies in 3 pretty big software professional companies that have found barriers to be existing. And gender mag has been used by a whole different slew of companies using printers, big computers, big software companies. And in every case, teams have found problems with their software to have gender biases, ranging from 25% to like, I think, 68 or 70%. And we found to be 73% in the open source case. It is very much dependent on theoretical models and frameworks. The barriers work is based on models. It's from HCI research. And the facets have come from a lot of research. And the 5 facets we chose, there might be very many other ways women and men differ. But we chose these 5 facets because each of these facets have at least 3 or more independent empirical studies that have found statistical difference between men and women. So we chose those 5. If you have the conclusion, the glass floor exists, and it is not that women in technology or women in OSS need the extra help. They don't. But the environment in which they work needs help. What we want to do is build gender-inclusive software which rests on supporting diverse ways of thinking and problem solving, one gender at a time, but what really it is one facet at a time, right? So it's not that just women need the support, women are extra sensitive. It's like women have certain cognitive styles, and if we don't support them, they just have to do the extra barrier. They have to just do the extra work. So I ask you to be a partner in our work in GenderMag. So please use GenderMag in your own tools and infrastructure. It's open, it is publicly available, it's free. All you have to do is download the kit, and I'll be happy to help you run these sessions on your own tools. You can contribute to the recorders to GenderMag. What we have done is, as I said, you have these discussions about Abby will have a problem, yes, no, maybe the discussion. We have all paper-based forms before, and it gets kind of hard to record them. So what we have is an open source project, GenderMag Recorder Assistant. It's open source, so please help us contribute. Please help us grow bigger, contribute to the project. GenderMag also has been there, as I said, it's been at least 4 or 5 years now, and we have found that every software tool that we have looked at or professionals have looked at have found problems. So now we're thinking, okay, we know these bugs exist. We know these inclusivity issues exist, but how do we solve it? How do we come up with best practices? Just like Nielsen's heuristics exist. Do we know Nielsen's heuristics? It's for UX, user experience groups, and how to make good UI. We want to see if we can come up with some kind of a process that will be best practices for making software that is inclusive. And what kind of features or what kind of changes in the UI could actually make a product better. So an example would be, Abby likes to have information up front before she does anything. That Tim likes to tinker away, click away, right? So if you want to give Abby more information, you can have tooltips. But sometimes tooltips are teeny bit. You have to go scroll up and down. It's really, really hard to see. But what you can do as a really UI fix, which is not very hard, it's cheap, is make them pinnable. So you can pin the UI or pin the tooltip on the side, expand it so I can read it and do things. One thing you have to make sure is when we make fixes for Abby, we don't leave Tim behind, right? Because Tim does not want to learn stuff. Tim does not want a big full screen message and that tells him what to do. He just wants to click. So here is again where a pinnable tooltip helps, because he doesn't need to pin it. He can just click away and tinker away, and Abby would be able to pin it and look at it. So this is an example of a product fix that makes the software inclusive for Abby and as well as for Tim. So what we're trying to do is collect these different types of examples of what is a good product feature as well as what's the right process. You can use the whole GenderMag cognitive walkthrough, which is kind of big, or you can have smaller moments. Maybe you just use the persona. Maybe you say, I am Abby, or we have found people who have big posters around talking about the different facets of Abby, and they talk about these facets as they're developing their design or developing their tools. The other thing we are talking about is we want to help newcomers contribute. We want to help newcomers become part of the community. And apart from just the inclusivity issues of using the tool, what kind of signals, what kind of metrics are these project hosting sites like GitHub or any other project hosting site actually making visible, actually promoting that might hurt Abby or hurt newcomers, right? So there's this thing called confidence gap. Women tend to have less confidence, less self-efficacy than men, and irrespective of how many contributions they have done, they have less confidence. So if we are talking about metrics that signal competence, maybe it's not just the number of commits, but something deeper about the quality of the work, how useful the work was, versus how many those little GitHub page, with all the little green things, how many commits I've done. And this is kind of going back to what metrics are actually useful, what metrics signify actual merit and not things that can be gained. So I'm very interested in knowing what kind of signals should projects look at, what kind of signals should we think about that will make sure that the playing field is level for women and men. How can you help us? We'd love to collaborate, data, projects. If you want to run gender math with us, we'll be happy. If you're learning already something, already thinking about inclusivity, talk to us. We're happy to collect this information, and we're working towards best practices. Also, we have core academics. So this, as I showed the first page, there's a lot of grad students we're trying to support. So if you have any kind of funding opportunities or anything that you know about that can help us support our graduate students, it would be amazing. And I'll leave this up here. So this is Gender Math. We have a Twitter account, and I'm pretty bad at it. I was trying to tweet yesterday about our CLS Community Leadership Summit thing, and I messed up my tweet a couple times. So you're learning, but we have a tweet, we have a Facebook. All our resources are genderman.org. We have a flyer, we have papers, the personas, the entire case. Please go ahead, use it. If you want to make it happen at your university or company, you can email me, and I'll be very, very happy to work with you. With that, this is my process.
Yeah, I was going to say, does anyone have any questions? I kind of do, because this is still very binary gender. So what would happen for a non-binary person? And these sorts of examples that you're using in research.
Right. So what we have done is we have Abby and Tim. We are there like binary men and women. But what really differentiates is the facets. Right. So the facets are problem-solving styles. And what we have found is, statistically, women as binary have shown these 5 facets, but the idea is, if you're able to be inclusive and support these 5 facets on both sides, then it will help people who are, non-binary. Because it's not like whether what my gender is and what my beliefs are, but it's how I actually problem solve.
It looks like you had steps of like the person is trying to do particular steps. Is this just like you develop those steps for someone who's going to make a contribution to an open source project, or do you have like steps for kind of generic things like I want to understand what this program is about?
Let me go. I'm trying to see because there are multiple steps. See, I can't do my thing. I can't even see my pointer here. So there might be a couple of places that I'm kind of confused about steps you're talking about, and let me see.
There was like a.
Is it this one?
No, it was like the P. It was like P56. This person is.
Oh, okay. Right. So actually, what we did was because we had started thinking about newcomers' barriers, the whole 58 barriers, and we knew from the interviews that finding a task was really hard, and that setting up the environment, getting this started was very hard. So what we had set up was like these were the 5 questions we had decided are the important parts, and even this required, the first setting it up required to go on GitHub, look at data, then go download it, use the Git command line, and do that. So we came up with our scenarios, but it's completely up to the project owner. So typically when we go gender math, we ask you to say like, who should your persona be? What is their background? What scenarios you want to use?
Right.
And then you decide the sub-goals and actions. So it could be anything. But it does have to be at this point about the tool, about the interactions with the tool.
How many of the inclusivity bugs seem to be just baked into GitHub? Like GitHub is every project that uses GitHub, do they have a certain base level of inclusivity bugs?
So a lot of the confusion with the pull request was GitHub. That's the way pull request has been baked into the GitHub process. A bunch of the documentation about the contributing MD versus README, and 2 of the projects also had the licensing agreement, CLAs, which was very confusing. So that is a little more project specific. So we didn't go out and actually make a case for GitHub and the project because we're not looking at it. So, but I think if we can go back and check and we could find out the GitHub issues.
Yeah, I'd be really curious to know, like, if we're already starting with a major disadvantage.
Right. So that's one of the things I'm trying to look at is next to the signals, which could also be not just the signals, is, like where people are focusing on. So where the disadvantage even starting up is. And one of the things that I had written for a grant, which did not get in, but you want to look at it next time, is looking up two different ecosystems. So for example, look at the Mozilla ecosystem, which has very different tools versus the GitHub ecosystem, and then see like which of these processes of entrance might be actually better or easier or more inclusive.
Just clarifying, see, the study was mostly on GitHub, and its infrastructure, and standardized.
So this study,
Because it sounds like maybe Mozilla has a different process, maybe.
Yeah, so Mozilla has a different one. So this was because we were basically trying to find out who would be interested, and there was this one company whose one project they were really interested in, and they were using GitHub. So,
Yeah.
And actually, software engineering, as you know, is the science of GitHub nowadays, right? So I was like, oh, let's do GitHub because it's easily available. But the Newcomer study was not project included, like project hosting side. It was interviews, and they were across Linux and across Mozilla. But I'm really interested in trying to see the GitHub versus the Mozilla ecosystem, because the tools they use and the documentation could be project-wise, but it could be different. It'll be interesting to see which makes it easier to get into the system.
Side question, is Stack Exchange come up? Is computer science now Googling Stack Exchange?
Yeah, so not in this case because of these 5 use cases that we gave them, because it was just starting, and we said, okay, let's assume Abby knows exactly what to do. She has the code in her mind and just put it out. But let's look at the process around it. There has been research in Stack Exchange that you might be aware of from North Carolina State. Okay, NC State, North Carolina State, and they have found that fewer women actually contribute to Stack Overflow. And one of the things they found was called peer parity. So basically, peer parity means if I see a lot of women here, I feel more comfortable, and I would like to contribute more, I like to do more. You must be feeling a little awkward in this case. I don't know, you're pure male here. But what they found is like if there are very few women, then the kind of interactions are different, and that affects them. And they found lots of people actually change their profile to sound gender neutral or actually sound the opposite to make it more easy. There was another researcher who said, like, I heard you talk about meritocracy, right? So we say open source is meritocracy, but a lot of it is pushiocracy. It's like who can push their idea more and who can talk more about their idea. It's a lot about the way you talk, the way you present yourself, and not always about the actual quantity and what you have done.
Confidence over confidence.
Confidence over confidence, yeah.
So I have one question, like you talked about expanding and other, and standards of best practices. Is there like a goal of somehow collecting what those standards of best practices in the future?
So we are trying to research basically what we're trying to do. So one of the first things we have done is we have created our gender match heuristics, just like some heuristics. It's like alpha, pre-alpha stage. We came up with it and we just use it in our SCI class. But that talks about the 5 facets, and we have given concrete actions about when doing this, make sure information is presented in both collectively together as well as giving the 25 year, right? So we are working with different companies and trying to just try to see what are they doing and collecting this information. We are calling them gender match moments, like different processes people have done, and we would like to collect data on products to say your tool was this, you ran gender match and you fixed these issues, and how your tool got better, but that will give us good product ideas. So we are collecting data right now, so if you're interested, we can talk more. So we have at least 3 teams we are trying to embed ourselves in and collecting data. So a couple of them are at OSU, and it's in a different bigger company.
So it was, in talking about the best practices and putting up specific things that ways that would be more inclusive of different learning and group stuff, I wonder because I think especially websites and things like that all kind of evolves really quickly, and for people is to figure out, like, kind of a test. I mean, so gender mag is that test, but like to see how their website is going in real time. Like, you know, like the persona is one thing, but maybe they're like, well, we're not so much Abby, maybe we have more Julie's because our website is aimed at women over 50 or something, whatever. But it, like, so that they could take metrics off of like how they're, like, when people are getting lost in that way on their website.
So, yes, so it'll be great if you collect that kind of analytics, but we haven't been able to talk to companies and get the analytics because it's so, important. But there was this one printing company that brought us in, and they were like, they're going on their mobile application, and they had this analytics. And they ran gender mag, and there was this one page that was so confusing, and this was a big, old, techie guy, and it was like, getting the Wi-Fi set up on the mobile interface was completely crazy. They couldn't get it. And then they had the whole Abby questions, and they said, that's where this big drop happened, because they knew from the analytics that people went to this page and then not to the next page. So the big drop in the page, and while doing this cognitive walkthrough with Abby's persona, they figured out why. Because the instruction was confusing, the page layout was confusing, it was like crazy out there. So it would help, but that would mean you have the analytics, you run it, and then you make these matches.
I get it. The gender mag is focusing on the, like, figure out why, and people already have their analytics for when they are losing people.
Yeah, so if you have some analytics and you run gender mag on yours, and you can make those points, that will be like amazing. So this particular company went and then made this bubble chart talk up to their management to say, like, how difficult it was, because showing the gender mag pattern was just like too difficult for them to go through. But then they made it like the effort required to go from one page to the next page, and that helped them. Thank you. End the show.
And you just pull out the plug. Just pull out the plug, and that's all.
Okay.
Then there's another button.
Stop recording.